Anders, if you've lost something, you should go after the thief instead of offending our guests. If this matter reaches Godfather's ears, I'm afraid you won't be able to explain yourself, Dahlia asserted calmly. Oh, now you're using Godfather to pressure me. Anders' gaze turned hostile. Today is his birthday celebration. It's better not to create any unnecessary trouble. I hope you'll consider the bigger picture, Dahlia said, lowering her head slightly. Even though she knew the man before her was out for her life, she showed no signs of it. The bigger picture. Anders gave her a contemptuous gaze. Does someone like you understand what a big picture is? Other than Godfather, I have the final say in everything in this house. That is the bigger picture. Perhaps you have the power and influence, but that doesn't mean you have the right to act recklessly. After all, Godfather is still the one in charge here. Dahlia stood her ground. Haha, all right, very well. Anders suddenly laughed, but his gaze was cold. Dahlia, you truly are smart. That's probably why Godfather values you. Unfortunately, people like you usually don't live long. Take care of yourself. Upon saying that, he patted Dahlia's shoulder and walked away. How dare a powerless woman challenge him? She was digging her own grave. Ms. Nicholson, you probably have angered Anders for backing us up. I'm afraid you'll have a harder life going forward, Dustin warned. Even if I did nothing, he won't let me off easily. Dahlia was rational about this situation. She could tell that Anders was ambitious. Since she gained Godfather's favor not long after joining the Moseys, it would undoubtedly lead to feelings of resentment among the others. Perhaps her presence had threatened Anders' position, leading him to see her as an obstacle that needed to be removed. No matter what, you must be extremely careful, Dustin reminded. I will, Dahlia nodded. Mr. Adams, you shouldn't stay for long. I suspect Anders will use another opportunity to create trouble again. How about I escort you out? That would be much appreciated. Miss Nicholson, Dustin nodded without refusing the offer. It's nothing. Dahlia smiled faintly, leading Dustin and Abigail safely out of Mosey's mansion. There were many eyes watching them on the way, but they showed restraint, not making any rash movements. Miss Nicholson, here will do. Dustin thanked her after they were out of the mansion. Sure, see you again someday. Dahlia nodded slightly and watched as Dustin and Abigail left in the car. She somehow had a strange feeling that she once knew who the young man named Rhett was. Meanwhile, inside the car, Dustin and Abigail took off their disguises, revealing their faces. Dustin, we've got the Emerald Corolla, but why do you still seem a little gloomy? Abigail was puzzled. It's nothing. I was just thinking about something. Dustin forced a smile. Dustin, you're not worried about Dahlia's safety, are you? Could it be that you like her? Abigail sensed something unusual. We used to be close, sharing a close fate once, Dustin explained. Oh, I see. Abigail chuckled knowingly. You're worried because she's in danger. But you're not sure how to help her since you already have a fiancé, right? You seem to understand quite a lot, Dustin said with a strange expression. In fact, he was indeed conflicted. On the one hand, he worried about Dahlia's safety, but he was also reluctant to get involved. Don't worry, Dustin. Leave this matter to me. I'll send people to protect Dahlia discreetly so you can sleep soundly at night. Abigail volunteered. Sounds pretty good, Dustin nodded. All right, then I'll leave this matter to you. With experts from the Mystic Arts Order ensuring Dahlia's safety, there shouldn't be any problems. Hey, don't get too excited yet. Protecting someone comes with a fee, but considering our good relationship, I can offer you an 80% discount. Abigail wiggled an eyebrow, raising 8 fingers before him. Dustin's mouth twitched, and he was momentarily speechless. This girl was truly an unapologetic money enthusiast. It was impressive that she was always finding ways to make a profit. Upon returning to the villa, Dustin began to make the necessary preparations. He had finally gathered all 3 precious herbs needed. The rest of the supplementary herbs were prepared beforehand. Next, it was time for the most crucial step producing Sanctifex. Maximus, I'll be locked up in there for a day. You need to keep watch vigilantly. No one is to enter and bother me, Dustin reminded. Don't worry, Dustin. Not even a fly will be able to enter these doors, Maximus guaranteed with a confident pat on his chest. Dustin nodded before looking over at Brooke. Dr. Bush, I'll leave Mr. Schaefer in your hands then. Nothing must happen to him before I come out of the room. Rest assured, I might not be able to cure Mr. Schaefer, but I'm fully capable of keeping him alive for some time, Brooke assured. Great. I'll leave things to the both of you then. Dustin gave them simple instructions and wasted no more time. Onwards before entering the makeshift alchemy room, he had all the herbs he needed. The furnace, coal, and all other required materials were already prepared. However, Dustin didn't rush into things. Instead, he calmed himself down and meditated for a while. It wasn't until he was fully relaxed and at ease before he began to produce the pill. Sanctifex was crucial in keeping Cinna alive. As a top-grade pill, producing Sanctifex was no easier than producing Longevitum. But as they were different pills, there was a great difference in the details that went into their production. Dustin had gone through the procedure in his head many times. Hence, he remembered every step clearly. There should be no mistakes as long as things went smoothly during production. First, he had to set up the furnace and put the cauldron in place. Then, he would have to go through the process of grinding up the herbs, roasting the sand, and settling the sand. Finally, he had to control the temperature of the furnace, extract the essence of the herbs, and combine them. Every step was crucial, and there was no room for mistakes. Dustin did every step meticulously, putting all his attention on the task at hand. As time slowly ticked by, Dustin focused on accurately controlling the furnace's temperature. The fire blazed and dwindled according to his will. The herbs in the furnace were repeatedly refined and combined. And just like that, time went by. The herbs went from a solid state to gaseous to liquid and finally solidified again. After repeating the steps several times, Dustin came to the most crucial part of the entire procedure, solidifying the pill. He took a deep breath and engaged his mystical pure energy, slowly channeling it into the furnace. Creating Sanctifex required mystical pure energy to increase the chance of success in its production. It will also ensure that the pill turns out in good form. As the fire in the furnace blazed on, Dustin channeled more and more of his mystical pure energy into it. Gradually, sweat began forming on his forehead as smoke surrounded him. It went on for about half an hour before Dustin suddenly struck the furnace with his palm. With a loud clang, the lid of the furnace flew off, and a strong, herbal fragrance escaped the furnace. Dustin focused his gaze on the furnace and found a light blue pill lying at the bottom. There were still wisps of vapor coming off of it. The pill was translucent and adorned with a ripple-like pattern on the surface. It looked very pretty, and one could even smell a distinct herbal scent coming from it. It's done. Dustin was overjoyed. He let out a long breath. Cinna was going to be all right now that they had Sanctifex. Just outside the door, Maximus held onto the hilt of his sword with both hands. He stood vigilant, not letting his guard down for even a fraction of a second. Brooke, on the other hand, paced back and forth in the living room anxiously. Dustin had locked himself away in the alchemy room all day and night. Neither of them had heard from him yet. Hence, Brooke was extremely worried. They had gone to great lengths to gather the 3 precious herbs. If Dustin failed to produce Sanctifex, Cinna would be a goner. After all, they had no more time to find an alternative method to save him. This was their only bet. Do you smell that, Max? Brooke seemed to sense something, and he took a deep breath. You mean the herbal scent? Maximus tilted his head curiously. It's been there all along, hasn't it? What's wrong? No, it's different now. It's quite special. Brooke went up to the door of the alchemy room. Then, he crouched down to catch a whiff of the scent, wafting out from the gap under the door. He spent most of his time around herbs. Thus, he could easily detect the slightest change in scent. All of a sudden, the door creaked open. Dustin was just about to step out of the room when he spotted Brooke crouching on the ground in a weird position. "Dr. Bush, what's wrong? Are you having a stomachache?" Brooke smiled sheepishly before quickly reacting. He promptly asked, "Dustin, how is it? Did you succeed in producing Sanctifex?" Dustin sighed and put on a dejected expression when he heard that. At the sight of Dustin in such a state, Brooke froze and paled. "You have failed?" he asked with a tremor in his voice. Oh no, if Dustin failed to produce Sanctifex, then all the herbs were wasted, and nobody would be able to save Cinna. Well, I wouldn't say I failed. It's just that I intended to produce a top-grade Sanctifex, but I only managed to come up with a good quality one. There's a slight difference in the quality. That's all." Dustin shook his head. The corners of Brooke's lips twitched involuntarily. He was exasperated. Was this the time to be fussy about quality? What did it matter what quality the pill was as long as it worked? And why was Dustin looking so dejected? Brooke wasn't young anymore, so couldn't take such false alarms. "So, you've succeeded?" Brooke asked. "Of course. I wouldn't do anything unless I'm confident I'd succeed." Dustin nodded with a smile and took out the blue Sanctifex. Brooke took the pill over to have a look. He was elated. "This is great. This is amazing. Mr. Schaefer will be all right now." The whole time that Dustin had busied himself with producing the pill, Brooke had also been waiting. He had waited for an entire day and night. He could finally be at ease now. "Dr. Bush, let's not waste any more time. Give Mr. Schaefer the pill," Dustin reminded. "Oh, right. We must save him first." Brooke dared not waste another moment. Holding the pill carefully in both hands, he jogged into Cinna's room. Cinna still looked sickly thin and pale. His breathing was also light and shallow. He looked like a dead man. "Dustin, are there any restrictions for consuming Sanctifex?" Brooke suddenly thought to ask. "No, just place it inside his mouth," Dustin instructed. "All right." Brooke slowly pried Cinna's mouth apart and slipped the Sanctifex in. It dissolved into a blue liquid the moment it entered Cinna's mouth. It flowed down his throat and slowly seeped into his body. The medical properties of the pill gradually healed and restored Cinna's ruined circulatory pathways. It started from his heart to all his other vital organs, and then to his skin and bones. After the healing of the Sanctifex, Cinna's body seemed to slowly come alive like a tree receiving rain after a long drought. They could see his pale face gradually regaining color, and his breathing got deeper. Impurities and dirt were discharged through every pore of his body. After half a day, Cinna, who had been unconscious for a decade, slowly opened his eyes. "He's awake. He's awake. Mr. Schaefer's awake." Brooke was so ecstatic that he cried tears of joy when he saw Cinna open his eyes. It had been 10 years. 10 whole years. The person that he'd been watching over had finally come around. It was a pure joy that was simply indescribable. Thank God everything went smoothly. Dustin teared up when he saw Cinna slowly regaining consciousness. He could not contain his happiness. It was as they had expected. Only Sanctifex was able to cure Cinna of his condition. All his efforts had not been in vain. "Bush, where am I?" Cinna lay on the bed and looked around in confusion. Then his gaze rested on Brooke, and he asked raspily, "And why do you look so old?" He sounded like he was in discomfort. "Mr. Schaefer, you're in a safe place. You have nothing to worry about. As for what you mentioned about me looking old," Brooke touched his face and chuckled wryly. "It's been a decade since the last time you saw me. How could I still look the same?" A decade. Cinna was briefly taken aback. Then he quickly caught on to what Brooke meant, and his eyes widened. "You mean to say that I was unconscious for 10 whole years?" "That's right," Brooke nodded. "For 10 years, I've tried every possible means I knew of to wake you up, but I haven't been able to. Thankfully, we've got Dustin here, who produced Sanctifex and saved you." "Dustin?" Cinna turned to look at Dustin and asked curiously, "Was it you who saved me?" "It was." Brooke smiled and praised him. Dustin is not only knowledgeable in medicine, but also well-trained in alchemy and occult. He truly is an all-rounder. "Thank you for saving me, young man." Cinna tried to sit up and thank Dustin, but his body was too weak to support him. He had laid in bed for 10 years. Even if Sanctifex had restored his health and rebuilt his circulatory pathways, it still wasn't possible for him to recover his full strength within such a short time. "Mr. Schaefer, are you not able to recognize me after 10 years of not seeing each other?" Dustin held back his tears. "What, do you know me?" Cinna looked Dustin up and down. "You do look pretty familiar. Could you be the child of someone I know?" "Mr. Schaefer, it's me, Logan," Dustin said with a quiver in his voice. "Oh, Logan." Cinna stared at him with eyes as wide as saucers. He was in disbelief. You're really Logan?" "The one and only." Dustin did not further explain. He simply took off his shirt and showed Cinna the beast tattoo on him. The tattoo was all black with vivid red spots as the eyes. It looked so real, as if it was alive, blaring menacingly. "Logan, you really are Logan?" Seeing the familiar tattoo of the beast, Cinna broke out in tears. Trembling, he forced himself out of the bed. Then, with a loud thud, he got on one knee and bowed his head. "Cinna Schaefer, General of the valiant troop from the Central Cavalry of West Lucosia. At your service, Your Highness." Bork, who was standing by the side, was stunned when he heard that. "Logan, Your Highness." Oh my God, did he mean the legendary Kirin of the Reese family, Logan Reese? "What are you doing, Mr. Schaefer? There is no need for such formalities. Please get up." Dustin quickly helped Cinna up from his knees. "Your Highness, it was my mistake for failing to protect you and the princess consort. I am ready to receive my punishment." Tears rolled down Cinna's face. "Mr. Schaefer, what are you saying? Had you not risked your life to save me back then, I wouldn't be standing here now." Dustin consoled him. "All of our friends in Valiant Troop are now dead. I'm the only one left. I have failed the prince and the princess consort. I have failed all of you." Cinna choked up. "Mr. Schaefer, there is no need to blame yourself for what happened. You did your best, and I'm glad to see that you're still alive. I was the one who brought all the trouble upon all of you. I'm the one to be blamed. Had it not been for me, you would not have laid unconscious for 10 years. Had it not been for me, our friends in Valiant Troop would not have died. I am the one who should be apologizing to all of you." Dustin's eyes welled up with tears. Memories of the incident all those years back were still vivid in his mind. He had seen with his own eyes how his friends and guards had collapsed in pools of their own blood just to protect him. They had been so courageous and resolute. He had always remembered the names and faces of each and every one of them. "You are a royal, Your Highness, and we are your people. It only makes sense for us to die protecting royalties. None of our friends who have been sacrificed have died in vain as long as you are well and alive." Cinna wiped away his tears. "What is this talk about royalties and commoners? That's nonsense. You are all my family and friends. None of you should have died for me. I owe my life to all of you." Dustin looked guilty at him. "With your words, I believe our fallen friends must feel at peace even in death." Cinna smiled through tears. Though it had been a decade since they met, they had changed a lot. But their relationship remained unchanged. "Mr. Schaefer, this might not be the best time, but I'd like to ask, what exactly happened back then? Who is the main perpetrator behind it all?" Dustin's expression became stern. Well, Cinna hesitated when he heard Dustin's question. A while later, he sighed. "Your Highness, you should let go of what happened then. Do not investigate the issue anymore. What matters is that you're alive and well, and that's more important than anything else. Mr. Schaefer, my mother was murdered, and so many of our friends died because of me. I cannot pretend that nothing has happened. No matter what, I will get to the bottom of it all." Dustin's gaze was unwavering. He was never going to let the person who murdered his mother off. Your Highness, some things aren't as simple as they seem. Even the prince himself has let go of it. Why are you still so persistent? Cinna looked conflicted. Rufus Reese decides for himself. I am my own person. He has his considerations, but I do not. He dares not take revenge, but I will. Dustin was adamant. I stand by my word. No matter who the true mastermind is and how powerful he is, even if he's the king, I will make him pay. When he said that, even Brooke and Maximus, who were standing by the side, were alarmed. Wasn't he being too reckless? He was challenging the king. Was he about to take on the entire nation of Dragonmarsh? Your Highness! Cinna clenched his fists, looking torn. He did not know if he should say what he knew. Based on Dustin's character, he would get himself into trouble if he probed any further. This was too messy of an issue. Even the ever-mighty Prince of West Lucosia was forced into silence. What more, Logan, who had no power and status? Mr. Schaefer, do not feel burdened. Just tell me what you know, Dustin said righteously. But of course, should you choose to keep your silence, I will not force you into saying what you do not wish to divulge. However, I will continue investigating the matter. I will never give up. Cinna sighed softly before relenting. Since you wish to learn the truth, I shall not hide it from you. I just ask that you not act rashly. I understand. I won't act unless I have full confidence. Dustin nodded. I do not know much about what happened back then, but I know someone who definitely does. Oh, who is it? Donovan Lindsay. Donovan Lindsay. Dustin frowned when he heard the name. That name sounds familiar. Who is he? You might not be familiar with Donovan Lindsay, but I'm sure you know the Prince of Carson, Your Highness, Cinna said solemnly. So it was him. Dustin saw red. The Prince of Carson, or Donovan Lindsay, was the king's younger brother. He was considered an exceptional among the Rorals 10 years ago. Donovan was acknowledged as an outstanding talent with a great strategic vision, but for some reason, he suddenly withdrew from the public eye. Until this day, his whereabouts remained unknown. Mr. Schaefer, are you saying that the Prince of Carson had something to do with the assassination back then? Dustin pressed. I can't say for sure that he had anything to do with it, but he definitely knows something about it, Cinna answered. Oh, why do you say so? Dustin narrowed his eyes. The Prince of Carson had a close relationship with your father. When we were attacked outside Elka back then, your father requested his help immediately. However, he never heard back from him. Cinna frowned. After that, the Prince of Carson chose to retire from the public eye. From then on, he no longer got involved in politics anymore. Clearly, he was running away from something. That is no doubt suspicious, but it's not reason enough. Dustin shook his head. There might be Rorals involved in the matter, but with Donovan's powers alone, there was no way he'd be able to do that. Your father had already noticed something amiss before things happened, so he did some investigations in private. He even specifically reminded us to be extra careful and to not trust anyone, not even the Prince of Carson. That was because His Highness had noticed that the Prince of Carson was behaving strangely and not acting himself those few days. However, he had no solid evidence. It was only his suspicion. Hence, His Highness only took measures to strengthen defenses and took no other action. None of us had expected how immensely powerful the person behind it was. Not only had the person planted spies around His Highness, but they even falsely issued military orders to send His Highness to the borders temporarily. It was too late by the time His Highness realized what was happening, and the rest of it is what you already know. So I'm not just making baseless claims by saying that there is something fishy going on with the Prince of Carson. It's just that His Highness had suspected this person who used to be his close friend since the very beginning. Your Highness, this is all I know. Cinna hid nothing from Dustin, telling him every detail that he knew. After hearing what he had to say, Dustin's expression darkened. As Cinna had said, Donovan might not necessarily be the mastermind behind it all, but he certainly knew something. As long as he could locate Donovan, he'd be able to find out the truth behind what had happened all those years back. Mr. Schaefer, do you know the Prince of Carson's whereabouts? Dustin asked. I've been unconscious for 10 years, so I can only remember what happened back then. As for what happened after that, I have no idea. Cinna shook his head. Who was it that saved you then? And how did you end up at Harmony Healers? Do you recall that? Dustin questioned. I do not know the identity of the person who saved me. I only know that his last name is Judd. Apart from that, I have no idea. Cinna shook his head yet again. How about you, Dr. Bush? Do you know Mr. Judd? Dustin turned to look at Brooke suddenly. 1. Truth be told, Mr. Judd had shown up yearly for the past 10 years. He would ask about Mr. Schaefer's condition, but every time we met, Mr. Judd wore a mask, so I do not know what he looks like. 1. Seems like Mr. Judd is a key figure in this. 2. Dustin seemed lost in his thoughts. He had to lead now. The first was Donovan Linzer, the Prince of Carson, and the other was the mysterious Mr. Judd. But seeing how Mr. Judd had been willing to save Cinna, Dustin deduced that he wasn't an enemy. The most important thing was to find Donovan and ask him about the truth behind what had happened. Mr. Schaefer, you should rest up since you've just woken up. If there's anything you need, just tell me anytime. Dustin helped Cinna lie back on the bed. Your Highness! Cinna suddenly grabbed Dustin's arm. He said earnestly, what happened then is all in the past now. Forget about it. If you continue investigating, it will only put you in danger. I believe the princess consort would have wanted you to live your life peacefully. Mr. Schaefer, this is an unresolved matter that weighs heavily on my heart, and I feel guilty for it. If I do not get to the bottom of it, I shall never find peace, Dustin explained. Seeing the look of determination in his eyes, Cinna could only sigh. He did not say any more. He knew that with Dustin's stubborn personality, he would never back down on something when his heart was already set on it. Mr. Schaefer, all you need to do now is to rest well. Don't put your thoughts on such trivial matters. I'll deal with them. Just rest up. Dustin shot him a smile to reassure him before turning to walk out the door. Now that Cinna was safe, he finally felt at ease. His goal was to find Donovan Linzer, the Prince of Carson, who was now in hiding. And only the person in Ailka could help him with that. After he left the villa, Dustin made a call to a mysterious number. Soon, the lazy voice of a woman could be heard. Hey, why are you calling me again? Haven't I given you the Ice Heart Lotus you requested last time? About the Ice Heart Lotus. I'd like to thank you for it. Dustin exchanged pleasantries before going to the main reason for his call. I'm calling you to ask about something. Stop right there. The woman stopped him before he could continue any further. Logan Reese, please do not overstep your boundaries. I made it clear the last time that I'll only help you once. We're even now. Are you going back on your word? It's true that we're square now, but if you help me this time, I'd owe you a favor. If you ever run into a situation where you need help, I'll be there in a heartbeat, Dustin promised. I have my way in the palace. What can you help me with? The woman asked. Everyone runs into trouble at some point or another. Do you no harm having another ally? Take this as an investment, if you will. You should know that the Reese family always keeps our word, Dustin persuaded. Fair point. The woman hesitated for a moment before continuing. All right, I'll hear you out. If it isn't too much of a hassle, I might consider helping you. I'd like to ask you about the Prince of Carson. Dustin cut straight to the point. 10 years ago, he suddenly retired from the public eye. I'd like to know where he went. Where is he hiding now? The Prince of Carson? Why are you asking about him? The woman asked curiously. It's a secret. It'll do you no good knowing too much. It might get you in trouble. Dustin answered secretively. Forget it then. I hate trouble. She seemed to have lost interest. Do we have a deal then? Dustin asked cautiously. I'll help you out just this once for the sake of your mother. But remember, this is the last time I'm helping you. The woman said sternly. Sure, Dustin answered. How long will it take to have an answer? You'll have your answer in 3 days. Wait for it. With that, the call ended. Dustin showed no sign of joy after getting a definite answer from the woman. Instead, he looked gloomy. The person in Elka must have only agreed because she was certain. She had ways to get the information he needed. But somehow, he just had a nagging feeling that there was something odd about the whole thing. The closer he got to the bottom of things, the more uneasy he felt. He didn't even know what was the source of this unsettling feeling. It felt like intuition, but then again, maybe he was just overthinking things. Forget it. I'll work things out as they come. Dustin shook his head and did away with these troubling thoughts. Just as he was about to return to his room for a rest, his phone rang. It was a call from Lana. Hello, Ms. Cameron. Is anything the matter? Dustin looked around and noticed that the sun was already setting. Ms. Cameron, haha. I'm sorry, you guessed wrong. Suddenly, a raspy voice could be heard through the phone. What? Dustin's brows furrowed instantly. Who are you? Why do you have Miss Cameron's phone? It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that your lover is in my hands now. If you don't want anything bad happening to her, you better get your ass over to the deserted cathedral at the north of the city. Oh, right. You better get moving now. My brothers here can't wait to get their hands on her. If you come any later, I'm afraid I can't promise that they won't do anything nasty to her. The person chuckled sinisterly. I'm warning you, you better not try anything with her. If you hurt Ms. Cameron, I'll make sure you pay for what you've done. Dustin threatened. Haha, we'll have to see if you're capable of that then. Anyway, I'll be waiting for you at the deserted cathedral in the north of the city. Remember, come here alone. The man laughed maniacally. And then the call ended abruptly. Without the slightest hesitation, Dustin sped there with his car. Clearly, the person on the call was doing this to get back at him. And the only people he'd crossed recently were Eleanor, Elena, Julie, and Scott. Dustin deduced that Ezra would not try anything funny with them after being traumatized. As for Julie, she just had her hand broken at the Mosey's mansion 2 days ago. So she should still be hospitalized now. It wasn't likely to be her. In that case, the person behind this could only be one of the few others left. But regardless of who it was, they had already crossed the line. He wasn't going to go easy on them anymore. After 40 minutes, Dustin drove into a slum in the north of the city.